If you're at an early stage startup, you're in the right place. We should be able to get our startups over the hump and without guessing or throwing spaghetti. Marketing is an important part of your go-to-market strategy, but you need to understand the why behind the what in order to get clarity, make the right decisions, and get results. Welcome to Season 4, where I'll be asking why in order to help bring more clarity to the messy world of early stage startup marketing. Welcome to the show. Sam is the founder at Breaking B2B. And Sam, what you focus on is B2B, SEO, and web design for revenue, not vanity. Well, thank goodness for that, because what is the point of the vanity stuff? There is no point. It's for revenue, right? It's for growth and revenue. So SEO and web design for revenue, not vanity. You're also the host of the Breaking B2B podcast. It's a top 2.5% podcast, and you've managed to get it to 377 episodes. I just hit 200 plus episodes, and I thought that was an accomplishment, but no. Almost 400 episodes. That is crazy. So I want to talk to you about the podcast, but first, welcome to the show. Let's talk about, you had the podcast for a while, but you just started as a solopreneur with your Breaking B2B company. You've worked in agencies before. What's the biggest pain point that your clients have had from your recent experience at the agency and also now as you're ramping up with your new business?
Yeah. And congrats on 200 episodes. Well, that's no small feat, Anna. That's respectable. And that's
Thanks.
A lot of podcasts, as you know, don't make it anywhere near that.
It's not 377, but it is 200.
We move. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the chat. So what do we fix? I mean, we have three, expensive, juicy problems that we hone in on, which we use whether folks come inbound. I weave it into my content on the podcast, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and even cold outreach. And that is usually we work with B2B tech or B2B service companies that are perhaps a little frustrated that every time a target client searches for quite literally what they do, their solution, their software, or their offer on Google, their competitors are above them. So stealing traffic or potential website opportunity, or maybe their team already does some SEO work or some paid ads, etc., but they feel like their website isn't actually earning trust and converting that hard-earned or hard-spent traffic into a steady flow of inbound demos or booked calls. Or the third pain point we fix is maybe they're working with a contractor or agency, but are just frustrated that they're not actually hitting the goals that they agreed at the start of their kind of contract or settlement. So they're kind of pulling their hair out that nothing's really happening to drive pipeline or revenue on the back end. So we tend to fix that with a bit of an unusual approach to SEO, content marketing, and web work, really.
So do you focus just on SEO then? Like when you think about content marketing strategy, it's not just SEO. Do you just focus on SEO? Because SEO is like when somebody is searching for something specific and they're ready to look into comparing different tools and stuff like that, like they're bottom of the funnel. Do you do top of the funnel stuff or no?
Yeah, we do a bit. I mean, at Breaking B2B, our main offers are B2B SEO, B2B websites, and then podcast production. We always start bottom of the funnel. That's why I get so frustrated with kind of some SEO agencies. I mean, you've only got to scroll on LinkedIn, right? And you'll see these crazy upward trend graphs. We got 10,000 visits from 0 in 3 months. And then you see a blog article linked. I'll comment on it. Awesome work. How many leads did it drive? Or how much revenue did that produce? And then there's just crickets because it's a blog that was so top of funnel. It was like a really early stage question. Yes, it might have driven some perhaps views to their YouTube channel, some podcast downloads, some email signups, whatever. But did it drive any high intent sales calls? Probably not. So as you started there, every time we kind of onboard a business, we want to know what folks are searching for when they have high intent for their software, their tool, their service. Absolutely exhaust that bottom of the funnel and then start working up only once we've literally exhausted every potential opportunity for someone that's in market for their offer. So to answer your question, yes, we do top of funnel, but it's less prioritized.
Yeah, I also approach things that way. I want to make sure that you don't have a leaky bucket, right? And that your website is optimized in such a way where people will trust you enough, right? You've got your case studies and testimonials and all of that content also needs to be there It's not always the case with early stage startups.
Sure.
So I do also prioritize, let's talk to your superfan customers. Let's make sure that you're using those relationships and building content out with them and starting at bottom of the funnel before going to top of funnel. So I love that approach. With Breaking B2B, you've now started this business, you're a solopreneur. I've had my business for over 4 years. And just before we hopped on the call, I was telling you, like, every 2, 3, or 4 years, I want to just blow up the business and like start from scratch and make sure that I'm doing all that I can to focus on like the main things I'm really good at and make sure that I have like differentiating value and all the stuff that I help my clients with. I want to make sure I do that with my own business. But you're starting out. What would you say is your differentiator? Like, what makes Breaking B2B unique?
There's probably a lot of folks that would disagree with me, but our headline is quite literally B2B SEO and websites for revenue, not vanity. And that is because of my own frustrations and prospects and clients' frustrations, just that agencies weren't really delivering that. They were pushing metrics like, we've got these keywords, page one, and we've increased your website traffic. We've got all these organic visits, but like we alluded to there, it's not really contributing to pipeline. So yes, we're showing you some upward trend metrics, but the sales team are still frustrated because they're doing a ton of outbound, or maybe you're relying on ads, be it Google paid search or LinkedIn ads, maybe even an ABM strategy, but the organic search strategy simply isn't contributing to that pipeline. So that's kind of what we stand against. That's my point of view in the market. And that's kind of the enemy that we take, that we want everything we do to actually drive pipeline. Because just like yourself, Anna, I'm on the cold hard front of it, dealing with sales calls that come inbound our end. So whilst I build out my own SEO strategy for this business, I want to make sure that I practice what I preach, that we're ranking for relevant terms around B2B SEO agency and so on, which we already have started to within 2 to 3 months. And I want to make sure that that drives qualified leads for my own business. So very much taking a similar approach. So that's where we stand, really.
That's great, because you've been podcasting for a while, 377 episodes. How is that going to be part of your content strategy for Breaking B2B? Is it?
Yeah. It plays into it. So the podcast is good in a number of ways. So in fact, we just did an episode on this, like 5 ways you can use your podcast to drive B2B leads and pipeline. And there's a bunch of strategies that we use to do that for ourselves. So when I first started my podcast, it's actually renamed like a few times over the years. So when I started it 4 years ago, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. All I knew back then is that I enjoyed listening to podcasts, and I wanted to use it as an excuse to interview people that had already got to where I wanted to get to. So originally, I was just interviewing like entrepreneurs that I admired, sales experts, marketing experts. Wasn't B2B related, really. It was just folks that I thought were pretty smart and I wanted to steal ideas from and that could have a good conversation. It wasn't until the last probably 2 years or so that we kind of renamed the show, and I took a focus that I want to kind of make it tuned into B2B marketing, and in my case, use it in a few ways that could actually fuel business growth. So one angle is the ABM play, which I'm sure a lot of people have spoken about over the years, where you kind of look at your top 50 ideal clients. In our case, we tend to work with VPs of marketings or CMOs at tech companies, usually in the SaaS space, but not always. So I'd find out kind of, who is it worth me having a conversation with? What can I leverage with them to make them look like it's going to be a good idea for them to come on the show, and start building a relationship with folks that would never normally entertain a cold call or a cold email or some kind of cold pitch. So yeah, inviting them to be on my show. And by that time I could leverage, like, it's one of the top shows in B2B marketing because we'd been around a little while. So I tend to use something I recommend is the painfully short outbound message. So I quite often just find VPs or CMOs and just say, hey, Steve, or hey, Sarah, we'd love to have you on my top 10 B2B marketing show, against a conversation. Nothing more than that. 90% of the time they'll say, yeah, we'll have a chat. They'll come on the show, and some of those, before we do the episode, we'll have a bit of small talk and talk about what they're doing from a marketing perspective. Some of them might be interested in a further chat about SEO or website or podcast production. Some won't. That's fine. We'll keep in touch. They might refer me in the future. I'll see my LinkedIn content, might join my email list, and they might pass me work as and when relevant. That's probably one of the strongest plays from podcast, but there's a bunch of others that we use that I'm happy to dive into as well.
How do you decide what to talk about with people? One of the things that's hard for me to figure out is making good content for people that are listening while also thinking about if it was this sort of ABM play, which by the way, I have not done. I tend to invite people based on what is my season about? What do I want to dig deeper into? Who knows about this topic? And then I bring them on, and I don't really use it as a sales machine. But how do you decide what to talk about with these people? Because you bring on these people for another motive. The motive is like maybe they'll want me to partner with them and help them out with their SEO or website, right? So how do you decide what to talk about?
It's a good question. There's a few elements to it, and this might not suit every personality type. And it's something that I was terrible at. Like, I don't know if you were the same, Anna, but when I first started my show 4 years ago, I was scared stiff on my first interview. I could barely get my words out. I don't know. I was stuttering through the whole show. I think I was literally shaking as well when I was recording it because I was so nervous. So,
I had a glass of wine
did you?
for my first episode. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, because I didn't know what I was doing. I did invite a friend from grad school. He was my first episode. So I felt more comfortable, and I think it went better because I knew him already. That's not always the case. It's usually not the case when you invite people like with the ABM play that you're talking about. So yeah, I totally hear you on that.
Yeah. So, and to add some context, probably the first 100 or 200 guests were not an ABM play at all. And for a bit more context, we don't always do ABM. Like, I do some solo episodes on dedicated topics that are relevant to our niche. Sometimes I invite guests I just think will be able to share value. And then sometimes I do it from a business standpoint. But to answer your question, there's a few ways. So on the actual invite form, I ask some specific points around, look, what can you hit? Please take a look at the show first, either listen or watch. This is our audience type. So we've got B2B marketers, B2B founders that tend to tune in, usually from tech or service companies. What can you speak to that's going to be actionable that they'll be able to take away from that episode and implement today? So give me 3 topics that you can talk to that is going to be actionable, and add a little pretext of kind of why I should definitely get you on the show. So I force them to be specific and actionable and crispy. And then not only that, after they've submitted that form, I will then kind of have a look at it. I'll check if we've had any past episodes that are maybe exactly what they want to talk about. And I might say, look, can we tweak this a bit? Can we change this a bit? If they're hard line and no, I'll say, well, it might not be the right time for you to come on the show now. Whereas if they're a bit flexible, then I'll say, great, let's kind of tweak this a bit. So at the same time, like you said, Anna, we want to make sure the show is valuable for whoever's listening or whoever's watching. So they're actually going to get some takeaways, going to get some practical tips, some advice or a case study or a walkthrough, whatever the format of the show is. So it's actually genuinely useful and not just a show for the sake of it.
And I mean, we did that preparing for our episode together where I sent you something and you were like, nope, can't talk about that. I was excited to talk about it. You told me, can't speak to that. So I'm glad you did. And then we decided to kind of tweak it a little bit. But yeah, I think it's like a back and forth. I love that you asked those questions. Like, what are the 3 things that you can speak to that can give the listener immediate something to like go off and try, right? Or think about. Do you have seasons or you don't use seasons?
I probably should, but because I'm so stupid, I just keep the show going. Don't take a break. At the moment, we're on weekly episodes, and that's either like a solo episode or a guest episode each week. So it keeps me on my toes.
Have you played around with formats and experimented?
When you say formats, you mean?
Like you said solo, you said like the host with a guest. Anything else that you've tried?
Yeah, we've done, although that's primarily been the format as such, we've done walkthroughs. So sometimes I'll share, look, these are 3 experiments I'm running for my own business this quarter. And in my case, like I've done episodes where I've tested outbound. I've tested cold calling myself to VPs of marketing, CMOs at fast growth tech companies, and reported on the leads, the appointments, and the revenue that's driven for my business.
How did that go? Just curious. How did that experiment go? I've always wanted to test that.
Surprisingly well. I'm about to drop an episode on Breaking B2B this week. We did 100K in revenue from cold calling just in my spare time last year. So this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but it's quite funny. So basically, I thought, look, I'm spending way too much time scrolling on LinkedIn. Whatever I'm doing, I've got my emails on one screen, I've got LinkedIn on my other screen. I'm messing around for 2 hours at least a day on LinkedIn. I had friends that I'd interviewed on the podcast and sales practitioners, because I'm an ex-sales guy myself. Like being a founder, you're selling most of the time, as well as marketing your business, running your business, operations, production, etc. I thought, this time that I'm wasting scrolling on LinkedIn feed, I could actually try outbound and see if I can connect with some VPs of marketing, CMOs. Purchased a dialer for like $20 a month, purchased some data, super cheap, tools like Lusher, Apollo, and just thought, let's give it a go. Before I knew it, I was kind of connecting to them, getting rejected like super quick by VPs of marketing and whatever. But some are receptive. And I think the thing is that as much as you see on LinkedIn, like cold calling doesn't work and stuff like that, like a lot of the time, these folks are actually surprised to get you on the phone as opposed to pitching them on LinkedIn or over email. So if you can open with what's called a pattern interrupt, where you recognize that it is a cold call, and if you can lead with those problems you fix and understand what problems that you fix that have a big impact on the businesses you help and the result of not fixing them, and if you can dig into that in a thorough way that speaks to that ICP that you're going after, cold calling is effective if it's done strategically. I'm not saying it's a really good use of your time if you're a founder, but if you were like me messing around on LinkedIn, I could be writing my posts on LinkedIn, engaging on LinkedIn whilst I'm on this dialer messing around. So for me, it made sense.
And that's what I mean by blowing things up. Like I just mentioned, sometimes we get sort of like set in our ways and we're just getting into this consistent rhythm, consistent pattern. And then if you step back, you're like, I could just blow this whole thing up and start from zero and try something completely different. And it might be 10 times better. I actually was just thinking about that. What if I tested this? What if I tested that? And you did. And it works. And also, like, hey, I'm Sam and I do the marketing stuff, but here I am cold calling you. Right? That's different. And maybe they've seen you on LinkedIn. Maybe they've heard about you and they're like, wow, I'm getting a call from this person. This is different. So there is something to it, I think. Whenever someone says like SEO is dead or cold calling is dead or whatever, don't listen to that. Podcasting is dead. That'll be the next one. It's not here yet, but it'll come. I think that's just ridiculous. And you got to test it. I just got a cold email from someone this morning. I hate cold emails, but I got one and I responded to it. And it's because the person said something completely different. They're like, we will work on 40 videos for you in the next 14 days. And if you hate them, it's completely free. And I was like, wow, this seems like a no-brainer. Show me some samples, right? I want to see like how good their videos are. But that is, I think, what like a pattern disrupt. I'm not used to getting emails like that. So if you can be creative and change the way things have been handled before, things can work. So love it. I was supposed to take some time and ask you, what burning question do you have for me? So maybe if you can ask me, and if I don't have time to answer in the next couple minutes, I can answer it in another episode. But do you have any question for me, Sam?
Yeah, sure. The main thing that I'm curious to know from other founders or other marketers is, what is the most effective channel that you're using right now to drive qualified sales pipeline, and maybe a quick run through of how it's working out.
Yeah, I'll be on your show coming up. So I can also speak to this on your show. I just realized, right?
Sure.
I want to call something out before we close out. I'm not going to answer this question. I'll answer it when I get on your show. But the most effective channel, when you think about the context of like something could be even more effective, like most effective channel or most effective marketing play, it might be dwarfed by the fact that like you could have been doing this other thing or this other, you're doing three things and you could have been doing this one thing, which would just be way better than those three things you're doing. And so that's something that's been on my mind, but I'm happy to speak to what's been effective for me up until now, like these past 4 years as I've been building the business. But I'm also thinking about like, what am I missing out on because I'm not going bigger? I'm not thinking beyond the incremental gains of the business. I'm thinking more of like, what can I drop and what can I prioritize and focus on because it's going to give me bigger results. So, Sam, great question. We'll cover it more on your show. If anybody wants to find Sam, you can. He is on LinkedIn, Sam Dunning, and check out Breaking B2B. Congrats on starting the business. Congrats with the podcast, breakingb2b.com. Breakingb2b.com. Yes, I said that right. Thank you so much, Sam.
Appreciate it, Anna. Thanks for having me on.
So I forgot to answer his question when I was on Sam's show, Breaking B2B. So I'll actually answer it now. Sam asked me, what is the most effective channel you're using right now to drive pipeline? When I started my business back in 2020, I knew that I wanted to practice what I preach. So right away, I started writing articles. I had things to say. I wanted to get my point of view down on paper. I started posting on LinkedIn. And then in November 2020, I started the podcast, which is in its 4th season, 200 plus episodes. So I did this analysis January 2023, and also actually more recently in 2024. And I found that about 50% of my business comes from LinkedIn, and the rest from referrals or from customers. It's pretty much the same for 2024. I find that my best clients follow my content on LinkedIn and they already know about me and my knowledge and my values around marketing. Sometimes the things I do to market myself are really easy to tie back to pipeline and revenue. For example, one client saw me in a video clip on LinkedIn and she follows Ann Handley, which if you know Ann Handley has like, I don't know how many tens of thousands of followers and is very well known. And so she saw me pop up talking with Ann Handley and had a need and decided to chat with me and then decided to work with me. But more often though, it's not as clear. I'm putting out content weekly. I can't tie every piece of content to a customer. But what I do is I ask in discovery calls, how did you find me? And I get the answer, LinkedIn, or someone they know shared my information. And so what do I post on LinkedIn? I post content from my podcast. I also have a monthly newsletter with hundreds of subscribers, but I keep that up mostly because I just love to write. It's really not to sell my services. I also don't sell my services on LinkedIn either. I try to be really clear though with my profile. So if someone looks me up on LinkedIn, like, who is this person, Anna, that's talking about startups and marketing and content? And it's right there, fractional head of marketing. So it's pretty clear. Anyway, Sam, hope that answers your question. Still LinkedIn. I just hit 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. So I feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg still. I'm not planning to expand in other social channels. I don't want to spread myself too thin. So in summary, that is what it is. And if you're listening and you have thoughts or recommendations for me, let me know. This has been my experience, but I'm always open to hear from your experience. See you next time. Thanks for listening to this weekly episode of Modern Startup Marketing. New episodes are dropping weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, search for Anna Furmanov, visit my website to learn more about how I help early stage startups, go to furmanovmarketing.com, and don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.